All right, starting with Matthew Kadish's pick for this week's topic is Bad Taste, the Peter Jackson movie, the first Peter Jackson movie ever made, apparently. Mm-hmm. And Kadish, why don't you tell us about this movie and tell us why you picked it? It seems like you have a pretty...
I have a special connection to this movie.
Special connection to this movie. So why don't you tell us about that?
So this is a movie about a small town in New Zealand that gets invaded by AIDS, and that stands for the Astro Investigation and Defense Service. And they keep saying they need a better name. But basically, a group of aliens kind of kills the entire population of this small town. So the population disappears, and the AIDS boys are sent in to investigate it, and they discover these aliens, which you can spot because of their blue shirts, the alien uniform, running around town, basically harvesting human beings in order to create food for an intergalactic fast food chain that they are shipping like human corpses off planet to basically fund in a kind of McDonald's versus Burger King war in outer space.
Which puts the phrase, I'm a snack, in a whole new perspective.
I gotta say, I didn't get any of that out of this movie, but okay, keep going.
It's just because you were trying to get through it. I get it.
Didn't.
So I have a very special kind of relationship with this movie because there was a time in high school where I had decided that I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I got really into the Evil Dead movies. Like Evil Dead 2 was kind of the inspiration for me to kind of move into directing and wanting to do like low budget kind of movies with my friends that, had special effects and makeup effects and stuff like that. And so I got really into kind of the schlocky horror comedy stuff because at the time, horror was kind of like where you could do low budget stuff and actually get noticed doing it. So I went to the video store one day and I asked the store clerk, I was like, hey, are there any movies out there like Evil Dead 2? And he's like, well, have you ever heard of Peter Jackson? And I was like, no. He's like, he's been doing a lot of really cool movies out of New Zealand. He's got this movie called Dead Alive and Bad Taste. I was like, oh, okay, well, show them to me. I want to rent them. And so I watched both these movies and they were fantastic. They were exactly what I was looking for. And like me and my friends, when we'd have like sleepovers and stuff like that, we'd watch these movies and we'd laugh our butts off. And I would study these movies like they were the Zapruder film, like I'd go frame by frame on some of them. I'd immerse myself into like all the information I could get about the making of them. And what made them so special was that Peter Jackson, like he was like a complete unknown at the time. Like he had just, like by the time I got into him, he had just finished his third or fourth movie called Heavenly Creatures, which was a movie that kind of put Kate Winslet on the map. And that led to her getting her role in Titanic and stuff. But he had made like 3 really schlocky movies before this. The first one was Bad Taste. The second one was Meet the Feebles, which is a kind of adult puppet movie. And, it's got like puppets doing like drugs and doing incredibly violent things and stuff like that. And then there was Dead Alive. And the story behind Bad Taste is just so fascinating to me. And I know that you guys watched it as like a consumer of movies, which I guess is kind of the normal way to do it. But I watch it as like a filmmaker looking at a movie.
There's a big difference between those two things.
There is a big difference, but I think that this movie appeals to a very certain kind of niche audience because like the horror movie audience, with the exception being Jude, like loves this movie.
That is not true.
And it is very like gross. Like it's not a very it's incredibly gory. In fact, it got banned in Australia for being so gory when it came out. But the story behind the making of this movie is just fascinating to me because it was Peter Jackson's first movie. It started off as a short film that he was going to make just to test out this new 16 millimeter film camera that he had bought used. It was a Bolex 16 millimeter film camera. And if anyone's ever gone to film school, you'll know what a Bolex is. It was like the film cameras that they used in World War II that were just indestructible, and they were hand cranked. They didn't require any like batteries or anything like that. And he just had this single camera, and he started filming this short film with his friends. And he had so much footage, he was like, I could probably make a feature out of this. And so he shot this movie over the course of 4 years.
God damn.
On the weekends with his friends.
Some dedication.
But like the stuff that he was doing at the time was so off the wall and outside the box, and it was really innovative because like he built his own dolly system, he built his own crane, he built his own Steadicam, like his counterweighted Steadicam was something that he just like threw together with like a dumbbell weight and like a stick and stuff, and like. So like he did all the special effects himself, all like the creature effects, all the gore effects. There was not a single real gun in this movie. Like all the guns were made from aluminum pipes and wood.
I noticed that several of the guns were actually the same ones that George Lucas used in Star Wars for the Stormtrooper rifles. It's the same gun, except for George Lucas just made a few modifications, but Peter Jackson used the same one. I can't remember the model of it.
Well, he molded the guns to look like real guns, but for the most part, like all the stuff in this movie is fake, and they did it in post. And it was a one-man crew. It was like Peter Jackson with his camera, and they didn't record sound while they were shooting.
No, I could tell that.
So
I could definitely tell.
All the dialogue and stuff in the movie was dubbed in afterwards. And it was funny because Peter Jackson self-financed this movie up to a certain point. Like he spent $26,000 of his own money, and they got about 2/3 of the way through the movie. And then he went to the New Zealand Film Commission and showed them what he had done. And they were like, well, no one's doing anything like this in New Zealand. So here's $230,000 to finish the movie. And you can tell at the point where he got that money because stuff starts blowing up.
Yeah.
and the creature effects, like he did all the plaster molds and then the latex sculpting, and in the movie the aliens' heads are all like kind of sloped backwards.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because he had to bake the latex in his mother's oven. And that was the only way that the heads would fit into the oven, is if the heads were like kind of like sloped back to because like when you pushed it in, it hit the top of the oven. And I mean, it's kind of funny because at one point there's a character, I forget his name, but he's the guy with like the walrus mustache who's like at the beginning. I think his name was Barry. And like that guy over the course of the 4-year shoot got married to a new wife who was like super religious, and she wouldn't allow him to shoot on weekends, because on Sundays she was like, you can't do anything because that's for church. And so there's a part where like his character just kind of disappears from the movie, and it's because like his wife refused to let him do it. And then like in addition to that, over the course of that 4 years, he also got divorced from her, and that's when he comes back into the movie.
Things you wouldn't notice.
Yeah, but like the whole movie was shot with like natural light. Like Peter Jackson like didn't light any of the scenes. Like it's kind of funny because if you look at some of the interior shots, like you can tell they just threw up like a spotlight just to get the exposure, because like there's like harsh shadows, like nothing's lit very well. This movie looks like shit.
Yeah.
But the camera angles and stuff were very kind of inspired by Sam Raimi's Evil Dead, and so like there was like a lot of like really innovative filmmaking techniques going on here. And the interesting thing about this movie is that when it was finished and it got the backing from the New Zealand Film Commission, it went to the Cannes Film Festival in 1987, something like that. It was either 87 or 88. And it kind of got this like huge, like tons of attention at the Cannes Film Festival. And it sold all of its like foreign territory rights like instantly. And it went out across the world and created this big cult following, which led Peter Jackson to make his next movies. And it's kind of funny because without Bad Taste, like we wouldn't have gotten Lord of the Rings. We wouldn't have gotten Weta Studios, which is the special effects house that Peter Jackson started. I mean, it's second only to ILM in terms of the industry in special effects. So like Bad Taste was kind of the impetus. It was the thing that launched his career, and eventually led to I believe Robert Zemeckis saw both that and Dead Alive, which led Peter Jackson to getting hired to do The Frighteners with Michael J. Fox. And once he did that movie, that led him to get the Lord of the Rings films, in addition to King Kong. So like there's a lot that cinema history kind of owes to this movie. In fact, I want to point out to you guys before you start trashing it that it's rated as the 416th best film of all time.
Wow.
Based on a survey of industry professionals and film fans.
Rigged.
So just know that before you
That's
start
because
bashing
people who vote for those kind of things are people like you.
Yes.
Look at this polished piece of shit and go, ooh, this is significant in the history of movie.
But I wanted to just say that when Peter Jackson won his Academy Award for directing The Lord of the Rings. So yeah, in his acceptance speech for his Oscars, so Jackson mentioned that he mentioned both Bad Taste and Meet the Feebles, which were his early movies, and he kind of said that the Academy had that those movies had been wisely overlooked by the Academy up to that point. So like he knows like that these movies aren't high art.
Yeah.
And in fact, Bad Taste, it might shock you guys to know this, Bad Taste didn't have a script.
What?
Shocker.
Yeah, so basically the way it worked was Peter Jackson throughout the week, he'd just think of stuff that he wanted to shoot, like cool stuff. And then on the weekend, he'd shoot it. And then the whole process would start over again. And then he would kind of try to assemble it in the editing room.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yep,
Yeah.
spot on.
All right, so let's go around the table. I'm going to start with you because you didn't even finish this movie.
I don't have a whole lot to say about
I know,
this
that's
movie.
why I'm picking you first.
It's just
At what point did you tap out?
I tapped out when the dude fell off the cliff.
Oh, and it was
That was
when Derek
Yeah,
Within the
no,
first 15 minutes.
It's about 25 minutes in because I looked and I said,
nope.
I'm
love that
gonna
scene.
drive over to Matt's house and verbally accost him violently. But no, I didn't even do that. But no, I just couldn't do it. It was just
Not your bag, huh?
not my thing.
Not even worth like.
It's like, oh, we're getting our special effects out of toothpaste tubes now, and it's just like, forget it. I
it
can't
was
do
the
this.
80s.
oh man, it got so much worse.
Oh, I know. I have a buddy named Lee who was into early Peter Jackson stuff, and he loved all those movies that you just rattled off. And what was the third one he made?
Dead Alive.
Dead Alive.
Yeah, he always tried to get me to watch that. And isn't there a scene in there where like some guy straps a lawnmower to his chest and like destroys everybody?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, and I just he showed me that, and I'm like, nope. I can't do it.
It's the best part of that movie.
Yeah.
Like instead of a chainsaw, and it's funny because like this movie had such a influence on other filmmakers. Like for instance, the inspiration for this movie was the original Evil Dead by Sam Raimi, and there's a scene in the movie where one of the characters gets like this big red chainsaw and he starts running around cutting aliens apart. And if you look at Evil Dead 2, which was kind of filming after this movie came out, Sam Raimi uses
What's a big chainsaw in the movie?
an exact replica of that chainsaw to give Ash. And so it was kind of like, well, I influenced you, so I'm going to give you a nod in
That's
my
cool.
movie.
I'm not going to lie. That is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, but the whole lawnmower thing in Dead Alive is another movie I'd love to talk to you guys about.
God.
But yeah, like this guy picks up just like this lawnmower with the spinning blades, and he just starts killing zombies left and right with it, just putting it on top of zombies, and it's like a blender, and they
Eat
just
my
go,
spinning steel, shithead.
and there's a priest.
Wow, you actually remembered a line from the movie.
Jude, you might hate me after the end of this little discussion here. Let's go to you next, though, because you have some strong feelings about this movie. So
Yes, tell us about
your experience of watching Bad Taste. She wrote them down.
You can totally edit this out if you want to, but it's just
Just try not to read it. Just like say it naturally. That's the only thing.
okay.
Put it in a full sentence.
Okay. It's going to read like a diary entry.
That's exactly what I don't want.
Okay.
Go
well,
ahead. Go ahead.
you can edit me out
Do
then.
your thing. Do your thing.
I need to get this out of my
Go
body.
ahead. Go ahead. This is now therapy for Jude.
Dear diary. Okay. At 5 minutes in, I wrote, I pray for death. This is
5
exhausting.
minutes.
This is exhausting. That's exactly right.
What did I do to make Matt do this to me?
You wrote these down while you were watching it?
Yes. It's taking all of my willpower to keep my eyes on the screen, and I feel like this is an endurance test. This reminds me of an Adult Swim show, but not funny and so much longer. I found my glasses on the couch and I almost put them back on, but then I thought, nah. I'm only halfway through.
This movie is so long.
It's an hour and a half.
No, it felt like...
No. Matt just handed me a piece of barbecue to taste immediately after the Pass the Bull scene. What is wrong with him? I don't want to do the podcast anymore. I don't want eyes anymore. I wish I'd started drinking harder earlier. I regret everything in my life that has led me here. I swear I've been watching this movie for at least 2 hours. Will I ever know joy again?
Oh my God.
Why is this still playing? I feel nothing. Those are my show notes.
I thought she was sick last night.
Yeah.
Before she went to bed. Because she seemed so, like, just dead inside.
I was.
Everything you just wrote down would make a great T-shirt. And I felt the exact same way.
You only made it.
But I just tapped out. I
25
said,
minutes and you tapped
done.
out. I felt like it was a relationship test. And I was like, no, I have to go through and I have to be loyal. I stand by my man. And when I got through, I was like, it wasn't worth it.
To be completely honest with you guys, I thought this was a 2-hour movie. And then he just told me that it was an hour and a half. And I'm like, no. No. This was 2 hours easily. It felt like...
Hour and a half, 45 minutes.
It felt like a Lord of the Rings movie, like director's cut.
Yep.
Like it was so long.
Yep. I felt like I was in purgatory and that this was just going to be how it is now.
Okay.
when I saw the guys walking around at the beginning of the movie, talking to each other through their walkie-talkies that they have duct taped and stuff attached to their shoulders, I'm like, this is the worst. I mean, I made it like 30 seconds in, and I'm like, what is this?
I saw the screenshot on Amazon Prime, just the picture of the alien holding a gun, and I was like, oh shit.
Well, that's better.
I was like, I don't want to do this. And then I started watching it. And have you
What?
finished your?
Yes. Have you purged enough?
I feel better now.
Okay, good. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna do my thing.
Yeah, do it.
So I saw the screenshot and immediately was like, oh man, not again. Especially since last week we had the same thing with that Monster Squad terrible movie, which I got a lot of hate for not liking that movie.
That movie is at
it's
least
great.
funny.
I disagree.
I think Bad Taste is hilarious.
Oh yeah, he was chuckling
I was sitting there
through
laughing
the whole thing.
While she's
and I
almost
was just,
she's trying to hold back tears.
every time he chuckled, I was like, who is this?
This is the film nerd.
This
Who
is a
is
funny
this?
movie.
Who
This is
is
a
this
film nerd.
man sitting next to me?
So I started watching the movie and I was in line with you two. I'm like, oh my God, this is so bad. And then I started watching it and I'm like looking at the people and actors and I'm like, that guy looks really familiar. Who is that? I'm like, is that like a young Peter Jackson or something? I had no idea. I haven't seen Peter Jackson, like his face in a while.
He hasn't come over recently.
Yeah, he hasn't hanged out with me very much, but I was like, I can't, is that really him? And then you texted me, yeah, it's a Peter Jackson movie, and that's him. And I'm like,
Yeah, he played two different roles.
yeah.
He played Derek, and
Didn't he play three
Robert
different roles?
No,
He played Robert the alien zombie dude, and he played Derek,
Yeah, and
which is
there are lots of people in this movie that look like him.
No, but
Must be
there's
the New
a
Zealand thing.
credit in the IMDb where he's also the minister.
Well, he played the voice on the kind of phone box at the beginning of the movie.
Oh, okay. So finding out that it was a Peter Jackson film and that he was in it kind of shifted gears for me a little bit because I was no longer watching it as a consumer who was just like, oh, I want to watch a fun movie. When he told me it was Peter Jackson, I was like, God, this movie's shit. And you're like, no, this is Peter Jackson's first movie. I was like, oh, okay. now I'm in the right headspace.
Well, aren't you fancy?
And I started enjoying the movie.
You're a sellout.
I was like, hold on a sec. No, because I was watching it. I'm like, okay, so forget all of the terrible, terrible low budget effects. Forget the terrible, terrible sound editing, because this is somebody just doing this in their spare time as a passion project. That changes my perception of what the movie is. So I'm no longer watching it for like just purely entertainment. Now I'm watching it as somebody who would
feel like
one day want to make a movie.
I feel like your TikTok videos are better made than this thing.
They are. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
So
The look he just gave me is precious.
So when I found that out and then I started watching the movie in that context, I started noticing some of these special effects. And I was like, oh shit, that guy actually had to make a fake head like 17 different times to get this shot.
There are no like stuntmen.
Yeah, there's
like they're all doing their own like hanging off cliffs.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, I get it. All right, cool. That's pretty, I mean, that would take a lot of effort to do that. And then to film it just for like one shot in the movie. That's all right. That's dedication. I get it.
And it was all Peter Jackson.
Yeah. And then I saw a couple of scenes, like some cinematic shots that are awful, just plain awful. But they give you a precursor of his future work. And I started seeing scenes and I'm like one of the things that stood out to me the most was the scene where the blood drips down on the guy's eyeglasses. It's terribly done. But I'm like, if you had a bigger budget and maybe a better camera and you did some kind of like funky, editing with that, I could see that being in like a horror movie where somebody's with the angle just right and the lighting perfectly and a droplet of blood lands on the guy's eyeglasses. I was like, oh, that would be a cool shot if it was done like legit, not just like a, film student thing. So I started seeing stuff like that. And then by the end of the movie, which you didn't even get to, by the end of the movie where he got that budget apparently, which is,
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, this got better.
Yeah, like the entire third act of this movie is just like one big long action.
Yeah, it's fun. It's like, I love the fact that they blew up the house and I'm like, oh, there's the forced perspective thing from Lord of the Rings where he makes everybody look smaller and taller. And I'm like, that's the first time he ever used that, because that's obviously a model of that house. Pretty well done model too.
Yeah, really well done.
And
all Peter Jackson.
Yeah. He built that model?
He was the model maker. He was the special.
So there's
he was he was inspired by Tom Savini in terms of he wanted to do all the makeup effects.
Yeah.
He was the prop master. He created all the props for the, like, it was his cars that they were using and stuff like that. Like everything in this movie was Peter. He was literally a one-man movie studio.
So there's in this movie, there's a house, which I'll explain to you because you didn't get that far.
I don't care.
There's this house, right? That all the aliens are kind of like hubbed in, and apparently it's a spaceship. I didn't really buy that, but whatever. And they're inside this house, and it's a real house in the beginning of the movie. We're like halfway through the movie where we get introduced to this set piece. It's a real house. It must be somebody's mom's house or something that they were like, hey, can we just shoot in your living room? Like, totally. Okay, go ahead. And then what happens later on is somebody gets a rocket launcher and they shoot it at this house. Obviously, they're not going to blow up a real house, but they used a model and he used forced perspective to make it look like the full-size house, and then he blew it up. And I'm like, oh, that's neat. Like, to me, I was just like, okay, I get it. That's pretty cool. He used a camera trick to make the little tiny model house look big, and then he blew it up with a firecracker. Like, all right, cool. I get it. That's legit. Like, that sounds fun. Like, if Kadish was like, hey, I'm shooting a short film, you want to come over and blow up this model? I'm like, fuck yeah,
let's do it.
Hell yeah, I do. That sounds awesome. So like when my perception of this movie changed and I found out what it was, I was able to enjoy it much more than I did the first half. I still hate the first half. This to me feels like a typical Peter Jackson movie where it's like an hour too long. And it's like you could have just cut a lot of this, like the whole beginning segment where they're chasing around and the aliens are chasing them through the town and they're like hanging off the cliff. I'm like, this is it drags the movie a lot. Like a lot. So I feel like that could be edited down to like maybe a 45-minute little short film and it would be dope, because the third act was actually kind of fun.
No, it wasn't.
And it was so over the top gory.
Oh, and hilarious. Like, I love the humor in this.
I did chuckle. I chuckled a handful of times. Some of the lines that the guys said to each other, I was like, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, but it's also like little things. Like, for instance, there's a scene where Peter Jackson's character Derek is assaulting the alien homestead with a chainsaw, and this is already after it had been blown up by the RPG.
And it cuts a perfectly shaped hole out of the wall.
Yeah, so like there's like broken windows and doors that he could go through, but instead he runs up and starts sawing through a wall with his chainsaw, and he saws out like a perfectly Derek shaped
silhouette
with like
cartoonish.
with his chainsaw.
It was very Evil Dead.
Yeah,
and
it falls down. He just steps through it. But there's also things like
and you can see that the wall that he steps
already
into
cut.
it's cardboard.
is cardboard. Yeah.
And
Don't watch this movie.
there's a scene where like they try to shoot the head boss, who's Lord Crumb.
all the names are freaking hilarious.
And they try to shoot him with another RPG, and the RPG like goes through like the big gaping hole in the house, past Lord Crumb and past like the hole that Derek cut in the
And
wall.
it goes through and all the way out the other side.
And so it passes right through the house and it blows up a random sheep. And it's just like there's this shot of the sheep and it's just like, and then all of a sudden it's like boom.
Yeah, it's just this little poor animal just blows up.
Oh, it's hilarious.
It is pretty. I did
If you-
chuckle at that point.
If you watch this movie and you get to that point in the movie, your sense of humor will have already left your body, and it's not worth it.
I don't know, like so there was a scene where the AIDS boys break into the alien house for the first time, and they find like this room that's just like full of blood, and one of them like almost slips, and he's like, "Oh my god, this is dangerous!"
Somebody's got to clean this up. He grabs a mop,
so he grabs a mop and he starts mopping up all the blood on the floor, and then another alien comes in and kind of surprises them. So like they tackle the guy. And
they rip his head off.
The aliens, like they accidentally rip his head off, and blood starts squirting everywhere from the neck. And the guy's like, Barry's like, "Oh man, I just cleaned that up." And then they
these guys have complete straight faces,
and then they like step on the severed head's spine and rip it off, and then kick the head out the window to get rid of it. And I mean, it's like,
wasn't it still talking?
Yeah, its mouth was still moving.
It didn't die.
Yeah, and so like it's little things like that. Like for instance, like in the third act of the movie, the aliens, who you can always tell who the aliens are based off of their blue shirts.
Yeah.
They
aliens wear denim.
Yeah, they switch from their human form to their alien form. And so like because the alien bodies are like so much bigger, they kind of rip through the clothes, and every alien's butt rips out of the back of his jeans, and you just see these alien butts running around for like the last act of this movie.
Hey Derek, he looks like a pot-bellied dickhead. I chuckled. They say funny things in this movie, guys.
They really do if you pay attention to it and you're not dead inside while you're watching it. But
Good one, babe.
You know what's interesting is that the last time I saw this movie, it was before Peter Jackson had made the Lord of the Rings movies. And in rewatching it, for this podcast this week, I was watching the action scenes and I was like, this is the guy who filmed the Battle of Helm's Deep.
Yeah.
Like you're looking at like the first incarnation of his kind of action chops, because like there's a lot of violence in this movie.
Oh,
You got gunplay, you've got knives, you've got people like fighting with hammers and axes, and and it's not. I mean, it's very obvious that some of it is.
There was a scene where one of the aliens is handing out hammers to a bunch of other aliens.
Yeah.
And
just one after the other.
It's so obvious that they just reused the same cut of the guy lifting up the hammer, and they just edited it so it looked like more than one person was grabbing a hammer. I was like, wow, that is some low budget, like cheap effects.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of creativity in this movie in terms of like how it had to be like made. But if you watch the action scenes, like obviously there are some parts where it's kind of like, well, that's the best you can do on the low budget. But for the most part, like, watching the action scene, like they had squibs, they had, muzzle flashes on the guns.
Just the amount of gore almost, I would say, rivals a Tarantino movie at some points. Like there was so much gore, like heads getting split in half.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, once the chainsaw came out, it was just like
at the very end when Derek does the dive through Lord Crumb's head.
Eat my spinning steel, dickhead.
And like actually like goes through his body and comes out like a baby. And he's like, and he breaks the fourth wall, looks at camera. And he's like, I'm born again.
It's so bad.
It's terrible, but it's hilarious.
It is. I did chuckle.
In its excess. Like I can totally understand why Jude and Vader did not like this movie, because it's not a movie for everyone.
No, it's not.
But when you look at it from the point of view of independent cinema and like filmmaking and the very first movie of this guy who's gone on to be arguably one of the greatest filmmakers of our generation, it's a fascinating movie.
It really is. It really is. I did once I was able to shift gears about halfway through the movie when it actually started getting good, and apparently he got a better budget and like the action started stepping up and it felt like a faster movie. I was like, okay, I'm in. I got it. I understand what this is. I understand why he picked it. and I can appreciate it for that. So, final thoughts on this movie, Matthew Kadish. What else you got?
I love this movie. Like it, I have a big nostalgia, like kind of bias towards this film, but it was also such an inspiration for me, like kind of growing up and wanting to be a filmmaker, and kind of learning how to do guerrilla cinema.
Guerrilla cinema.
Yeah, like just stuff that you can do cheap and low budget, and yourself. Peter Jackson I was a big fan of his even before he got cool, so like I just this film was such a big part of my film education growing up, and plus it was a film that all my friends and I like love to watch together and just chuckle about, like as it gets ridiculous. And I also think that it's got kind of a Taika Waititi sense of humor to it, with that New Zealand kind of Kiwi, very low key humor. Like there's so many great lines in this movie where
I couldn't understand any of them, to be honest with you.
Well, we had the subtitles on.
I had this. Oh, that's the thing. I forgot to mention. I was watching it with subtitles on, and the description for the music was hilarious. It was like slightly
synthesizer.
Yeah, slightly ominous synthesizer. It was goofy.
Yeah, but it's like, why do we have to wear these ninja masks? And it's like, oh, they're to protect our identities. No, stupid. It's so we can kill civilians and not get in trouble.
All right, final thoughts, Vader. What do you want to say to the people?
I don't have any final thoughts on this movie.
Jude, what about you?
I feel like I would have enjoyed a documentary about this movie more than having to sit through this movie and decipher Kadish's love for this movie.
That's fair. I think that's fair.
And what's weird is Jude loves really terrible horror movies. So like,
this was a bit too much, apparently.
Yeah, I thought that she might at least appreciate it on that level.
So it has come to my attention that Kadish doesn't understand me or know me at all. I do love B horror movies. And when we started, so first of all, the day before we watched this movie, we were about to have dinner, and he goes, so I don't really want to watch Bad Taste while we're eating dinner. And I was like, oh, okay.
It makes total sense now.
And then the next day when we were about to watch it, which was yesterday, he was like, so I just want to warn you, this is very gory. And I looked at him like he was a wacko, because I was like, I don't care.
That scene, the shared bowl scene, made me queasy.
Yeah. That was gross.
That was nasty.
That was gross.
That's the most infamous scene in the film.
God damn.
I never care about
You
gore.
didn't even get there.
I don't do gory movies.
Dude, there was a scene.
I can't watch like, what are those movies with the little puppet? Where he kills everybody, puts them in traps and things.
Chucky?
Child's Play?
No.
Saw.
Oh, okay.
I can't do those.
Yeah, the gore porn?
Yeah, I just don't do it.
Yeah,
I don't
so
either.
I never care about that. I don't care. It's
Please don't make me watch that.
somewhat.
Don't worry, I won't.
I mean, stuff like that is like comical to me. Like a B movie is
Yeah.
so funny to me because it's so awesomely bad. This was just bad. And that's the difference. I don't care if it's gory as long as there's something redeeming about it that I can get out of it, where it's either a good story or there's something funny that I can laugh about. There was zero involved in this that I could walk away from and being like, that was time well spent. This was just a terrible, terrible, life-sucking, soul-draining, time swallower of a movie.
It's kind of weird in my head because I'm thinking about it in my brain right now, and it's like this movie. I literally felt like they were sticking toothpaste tubes up mannequins' noses and squirting them out the other side and stuff.
I mean, that's pretty much what.
Yeah.
I feel like they were
but
sticking.
it made me queasy, right? But then I watched another movie, and I'm not trying to segue into Predator right now, but there's the scene where the team that went in before them are like literally skinned and hanging up out of the trees.
Yeah.
That doesn't bother me for some reason. It didn't make me feel revulsion or anything at one time at all.
Well, this movie is very gross.
Yeah, maybe it's
like there's a reason why it's called Bad Taste. So,
is there any...
In regard to the toothpaste thing that Vader said, I felt like they were sticking tubes of toothpaste in my brain and squeezing my brain out.
Which is ironic considering one of the main characters played by Peter Jackson, he cracks his head open at a certain point.
Oh my God.
And like he loses a part of his brain. And so like he has to pick it up and stuff it back into his head and then like put like a suture around his head to keep his brain from falling out.
takes his
time.
belt off.
Yeah, he takes his belt off and wraps his belt around his head to keep his skull together.
Yeah.
And he keeps losing a piece of his brain at one point, and then he has to pick it up, and it's got like gravel all over it, and he shoves it back in the hole.
Yeah,
That's what made him so badass.
That's what makes it better. And then at a certain point, he accidentally steps on his part of the brain after it falls out of his head again.
Yeah.
So he takes like an piece of alien brain and just shoves it in there.
And that's what makes him go bananas.
Yeah, and that's what makes him like a real
Gives him his
badass.
thirst for blood.
There was a point too where
I don't talk about it
they had a
anymore.
car that had
The Sergeant Pepper's.
the Sergeant Pepper silhouettes in the driver's seat or whatever. It was weird.
The Sergeant Pepper
This movie
vehicle.
was so wacky. It's just
Don't watch it.
that's you guys recommended it all, Jude?
No.
Matt, Joe?
Hell no.
No.
I guess if you're like a film student or something and you want to see how Peter
Just
Jackson did his first
Listen
movie.
to our podcast, and that's all you need.
Or if you're a fan of like, goofy horror comedy.
There is an audience for this out there, and Matt's not the first person I've known that likes this kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
there's an audience
for it.
It's just not me.
Yeah. No, I feel it. All right. Well, that was our discussion on bad taste. It's on Amazon Prime for free if you
Don't watch it.
if you so desire.
watch the first 20 minutes like Vader
Just watch
did.
the trailer. That's enough.
See if you can make it through.
Before we move on, I wanted to ask you one thing. At the very end, Derek is inside the spaceship and he's wearing the skin of the alien. Is there like a sequel out there that Peter Jackson made?
No.
Because he was headed towards Saturn or something at the end, and he was wearing the skin of the alien.
Yeah, they were headed back to the alien homeworld, and Derek, who kind of stowed away on the ship and killed Lord Crumb, put on Lord Crumb's skin. And when the spaceship gets to the alien homeworld, he's just going to kill all the aliens.
I want to see that movie today. I want Peter Jackson to make that movie today with his budget that he has now. That's what my one request.
coming for the bastards.
reprising his role as Derek.
Yes, with the cracked skull and the falling out brain. Like that's the movie.